Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. Environment Canada has issued a rainfall warning for many regions of southern Alberta, as the storm will remain with us for a few days. Another former UCP minister has put her name in the ring to become the next Premier of Alberta. And we hear from our foreign affairs expert Lisa Daftari, who explains how Russia's Putin may be prepared to starve much of the developing world in order to win his war with Ukraine.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. A rainfall warning remains in effect for the Alberta Foothills. Environment Canada says we should expect between 75 and 125 millimeters of rain in many parts of southern and central Alberta by Wednesday morning. Some areas, including the city of Calgary, could see up to 150 millimeters. There are warnings that heavy downpours could cause flash flooding and water pooling on many roads. Calgary says it has lowered water levels at upstream reservoirs on the Bow and Elbow rivers to make room for potential floodwater. The city of Calgary is warning people to stay off of the Elbow River in preparation for heavy rain that is in the forecast for the Kananaskis region. The city says no flooding over riverbanks is expected, but it says water temperature remains cold, and with higher flow rates, water turbidity is increased, making hazards difficult to see. Understanding the risk of flooding is important, especially when we're seeing heavy rains as it's making its way through the province. Now, the best thing people can do to prepare is to ensure that sump pumps are working well. Also cleaning out gutters and making sure downspouts are pointed away from the foundation of your home. An official with Lethbridge Fire and EMS says fortunately right now there's no risk of concern with the river levels that could cause potential flooding here in our city.
The city of Lethbridge is monitoring the river levels and keeping in contact with other municipalities on what they're experiencing and what's anticipated. Our emergency management division is always monitoring all hazards, and right now we're not at a specific threat level that we would deem to be necessary.
More information on how you can protect yourself from flooding can be found on the City of Lethbridge website. The high amounts of rainfall that we're seeing here in southern Alberta has many residents inspecting their sump pumps. But checking your flood protection equipment is only one part of what you should be doing. According to the Insurance Bureau of Canada, you should also be going over your home insurance policy to ensure you have the right coverage.
The insurance industry is now paying over $2 billion a year in severe weather on an annual basis. And these numbers have increased significantly over this past decade. When we think of a standard home insurance policy, it does not automatically include sewer backup or overland flood coverage. So these types of damages are optional endorsements. So if you're not sure if you have that coverage, reach out to your insurance representative and make a phone call before an event happens.
In addition to checking your sump pump and your insurance coverage, Dupree says you should also be checking that the ground is graded away from your foundation of your house. A judge in a Lethbridge courtroom earlier today adjourned the cases of the 4 men accused of conspiracy to commit murder at the Coutts border blockade. The cases have moved to next month because of one of the 4 of the accused, Chris Carbert, has hired a new lawyer who needs to get up to speed on the file before the matter can move forward in court. The cases involving Christopher Lysak, Chris Carbert, Anthony Oleniak, and Jerry Morin will be back in court on July the 11th. A 26-year-old woman from Medicine Hat who was charged with first-degree murder and indignity to human remains in connection with the discovery of a body outside of Pincher Creek received a decision on her bail application earlier today. BCN's Naveen Day has been following this story and has the details. Nav?
Well, Hal, Justice D.K. Miller denied Melissa Martins-Lagasse's bail application earlier today, saying that she failed to meet the onus for release on 3 grounds. Now, due to a publication ban, we cannot go into details about the evidence given, submissions made, or reasons behind the judge's decision. Martins-Lagasse was arrested and charged on November 23rd of last year after being considered a suspect after the remains of 34-year-old Megan Ekma were discovered a few days earlier outside of the town of Pincher Creek. The judge also prohibited Martins-Lagasse from communicating with one of the witnesses. Martins-Lagasse's next scheduled court appearance by CCTV is set for July 11th. Hal?
Thanks so much, Nav. Rajan Sani, Alberta's former transportation minister, announced that she will be seeking the leadership of the UCP. She says she decided to run to move Alberta forward. Sawney says if she were to become Premier, she would launch an independent public inquiry into Alberta's handling of the COVID-19 pandemic.
We need to know what we did right. We need to know what we did wrong. I was definitely involved in the COVID response in the early days, but I was not on the committee thereafter. Certainly what went right were all the COVID care supports. I was instrumental in that effort, providing food hampers and supports to vulnerable communities, particularly in Calgary, in Northeast Calgary. We also had a great vaccination effort to make sure that vulnerable people had access and time to get to those vaccine clinics. So all the COVID supports, including the financial supports, absolutely done right. What was not done right was the fact that there were a number of communities all across Alberta who felt that their voices weren't heard, that they weren't consulted, that they didn't have enough information about how decisions were made.
She says this inquiry would look at ways to support Albertans financially and offer more support for those struggling with mental health issues. Sawney joins a long list who are seeking the leadership, including former Finance Minister Travis Taves, former Wildrose Party leaders Daniel Smith and Brian Jean, and there's also word now that the Children's Services Minister Rebecca Schultz may be stepping aside from her portfolio and gunning for the leadership as well. Ottawa's proposed legislation requiring new labeling requirements for ground beef and pork is not sitting well with our producers, nor with the province. In particular, ground meat sold in retail stores must have a high in saturated fat warning label. Alberta Agriculture Minister Nate Horner says this move by the Trudeau Liberals will not only hurt those in the agriculture sector, but all Canadians.
While I think we can all support the federal healthy eating strategy in principle, Ottawa's scientifically baseless labeling proposal for ground meat will unfairly impact families struggling with high costs of living and would be an extra kick to producers already working to get back on their feet. Alberta's livestock associations have written to Health Canada to request that ground meat be exempt from the proposed front-of-package labeling, similar to exemptions being offered for other nutritious single-ingredient foods like milk, eggs, vegetables, and other meats.
Minister Horner says the labeling could severely impact Alberta meat producers by increasing production costs, lower consumer purchases, and decreasing exports. Grasshoppers can be a huge nuisance, especially for many of our farmers and ranchers. Now, when it's hot and dry here in southern Alberta, we tend to see a lot of them. The more of these insects we see, the more it creates an infestation scenario. A professor with the University of Lethbridge says since agricultural insecticides are not allowed to be used within city limits, the best thing a homeowner can do to limit the number of grasshoppers on your property is water.
Continuous watering with a sprinkler will hold them down so that at least they're not moving and eating very much. If it's a very small place, you could vacuum and confine and control them that way. But there really aren't very many spray solutions that you could use in a city that would hold grasshoppers down. That's a big problem, and that it would be nice if that was changed so there was something that could be used.
Johnson says there are certain barriers which may also keep the unwanted pests out. Many of us here in the province have been wondering where those utility rebates are. The province said a few months ago that we would be receiving help with our natural gas and electricity bills as inflation has made life so much more difficult. We asked UCP caucus chair and Lethbridge East MLA Nathan Neudorf if the checks are in the mail.
The electricity rebates will be applied directly to each individual's bill. So they won't see a check in the mail, but they should see that rebate of $50 a month over 3 months on their bill. And that should be starting as soon as July. It might take a little bit of time. There's a lot of electricity users across the province, but that's the start date for that. And the natural gas rebates are slated to begin in October.
UCP caucus chair Nathan Neudorf will also have details of when more doctors will be arriving here in Lethbridge to address the severe physician shortage. That Q&A is coming up later in our broadcast. Alberta's NDP asked again when those energy rebates will be kicking in. Energy critic Kathleen Ganley says the delay in helping Albertans has created a lot of anxiety for many families. It has also created an opportunity for scammers.
But this delay and lack of public communication has also opened the door to bad actors. Last week, across the province, we saw reports of families who were targeted by text scams. Albertans are receiving texts to remind them of the UCP program and invite them to click on a link to claim their $150 rebate from the Canada Revenue Agency. I want to say this clearly and publicly. This is a scam. Albertans will not be receiving a rebate over text, and your government has stated that these rebates will arrive directly on your bill, not through the CRA.
Ganley says the fraudsters appear to be targeting seniors and those with less technical skills. A group focused on due process of law is working to educate and empower those who have been ticketed or charged due to protesting COVID-19 mandates to self-represent. The organization Stand for These says there is a stark difference between two pieces of legislation, the Charter of Rights and Freedoms and the Bill of Rights.
It's extremely beneficial in what we're experiencing right now. Things like freedom of speech and freedom of assembly and these things that they're trying to suppress from us, you know, telling people they can't say F. Trudeau on Parliament Hill. Yes, I can. And, you know, these little things that seem like they're nothing, they're still rights violations.
If you look at the verbiage between the Bill of Rights and the Charter of Rights, right out of the gate, you see this massive difference in the way they're presenting. In the Bill of Rights, it says it's an act in recognition of your human rights and fundamental freedoms. Now, words are very important, especially with law. Recognize. They're not giving you your rights. They're recognizing that you have these rights. That was our first bill. Switch over to the Charter. It says the Charter of Rights guarantees. And we know what guarantee means. It always conditions.
The group is hosting an information session on how to represent yourself in court tonight, 6 p.m. Mountain Time via Zoom. Shepherd says they've seen a lot of success with those they've helped.
What we're seeing consistently is lawyers failing their client, specifically to COVID. And I'm not going to speculate why. It's happening. So we started coaching people like, hey, how would you feel about doing self-representation, giving them the information, giving them the tools, guiding them, giving them a script. And guess what? Every person that we have helped guide through this doing self-representation has had their charges dropped.
The group's Facebook page will have the Zoom link and provide more information with a link to their YouTube channel if you're unable to attend virtually. You know, many people in the city are still without a family doctor, and those who might need care but don't want to sit in a hospital or go to a walk-in clinic could go to a nurse practitioner clinic. AHS says the nursing staff will be available at the healthcare center to triage patients and that it is exploring options to reopen the ER as quickly as possible. The Health Delivery Agency says that recruitment of nurses is a challenge across North America and that it has a dedicated team focused on recruitment efforts. National Blood Donor Week began on Sunday. Canadian Blood Services says throughout the pandemic, the number of people who donate blood regularly has dropped by 31,000. The organization is in dire need of 100,000 new donors for blood, plasma, and platelets. Brenda Scott, the business development manager with the group, says they're trying to recruit people this summer to donate plasma, and there are 330 appointments to fill this week alone.
We are reaching out to donors in a variety of ways, via phone, via email. And this summer, we're actually excited that we're able to do in-community recruitment events. Again, we haven't been able to do that during the pandemic, but this year we are going to be in the community more so that all of our new donors can see us, ask questions. You know, a lot of people don't even realize that the plasma center is here or, you know, how high the need is. So we will be at a number of local events this summer, such as the Dragon Boat Festival, such as Canada Day, to help provide awareness about the plasma center and bring in some new donors that way too.
World Blood Donor Day also falls on Tuesday to honor those who selflessly donate to help those who are most in need. A new exhibit is taking place at the Galt Museum and Archives, and it's showcasing the history of local transit here in our city. The exhibition is called Ticket to Ride. Micah Quinn has more now on the interesting transit artifacts from past to present.
Seeing that gnarly old track with its historic dust and rust.
The curator of the Galt Museum, Tyler Stewart, says the Ticket to Ride exhibition features a piece of the old streetcar track that was dug up in 2020 from 3rd Avenue South in Lethbridge.
In the next month or so, there will be another art exhibition at Casa, which will use some of that streetcar rail. Some artists are using those for public art pieces as well. So I think it's a cool topic that goes kind of across the city and across different organizations in interesting ways.
Public transit was installed in our city in 1912, which consisted of a streetcar system of only 12 cars. It carried over 47 million people until 1947, when it was phased out and buses became the new method of transportation information for users. One of the unique parts of the exhibition highlights the personal collection of transit items from Lethbridge's first female bus driver, who started in 1974.
We were really fortunate to tell the story of Marriott Morose, and very grateful to her family, to her son Jeff Morose and her granddaughter Maggie Hemsing, who lent us some of the cool objects from her career as a transit operator. That story is really important to show how it's important to be equitable within employment in the public sector, and that public service of transit is an important one for a lot of people.
The Ticket to Ride exhibition will be showcased at the Galt Museum and Archives until September 4th. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
A wildfire located just north of Flagstaff, Arizona, burned close to 5,000 acres on Sunday, which triggered evacuations. In connection with the fire, Forest Service law enforcement say they have arrested and charged a 57-year-old man with natural resource violations. The cause of the blaze was not immediately known. Officials say people in the Arizona Snow Bowl ski resort and people west of Schultz Pass Road must evacuate. The American Red Cross in Arizona opened a shelter at a middle school to help accommodate the residents who had to evacuate. Thousands of people rallied at various locations across the United States over the weekend, demanding action on gun laws. This follows the mass shooting in Uvalde, Texas, that left 19 students and 2 teachers dead, which activists say should compel Congress to act.
I speak as a mayor, a mom, and I speak for millions of Americans and America's mayors who are demanding that Congress do its job. And its job is to protect us, to protect our children from gun violence.
If lawmakers who have the power to keep us safe from gun violence are going to avoid taking action that will save our lives, then young people across this country, everyone who can hear my voice, should also avoid. Avoid attending school if your leaders fail to do their job and keep us safe from gun violence.
A Yale historian says Russian President Vladimir Putin is preparing to starve much of the developing world in order to win his war with Ukraine. Our foreign affairs expert Lisa Daftari says Putin will do whatever it takes.
When you think about Putin, you think about what he has attempted to do in Ukraine and has not been able to, get that big finale or get, the kind of attention he wanted on the world stage. Well, this is a way he can do it. When he does affect the world's food supply, which he has already, had a domino effect in affecting, then, he is making those reverberations that he wanted. He is getting the headlines that he wanted.
Lisa will also discuss the latest tensions between the U.S. and China, as Beijing is accusing Washington of hijacking the support of countries in the Asian-Pacific region. She'll have details coming up later in our broadcast. A 15-year-old boy is being hailed a hero in Ukraine for helping the Ukrainian army with the use of a drone. His father says he began working with the military shortly after Russia invaded his country.
Це, тут мій дім, і, я не хотів, щоб з моїм домом було те ж саме, що з домами людей у окупованих територіях. Одна радість – це те, що ми знищили все-таки когось, а друга радість – це те, що я допоміг. Оце теж було дуже приємно, що чимось що зміг зробити, а не просто сидіти і чекати чогось.
That kid is definitely a hero to the Ukrainian people. Well, we've seen quite a bit of rain here in southwestern Alberta, and that trend will continue for the next few days. Full weather details are coming up. Environment Canada issued a rainfall warning earlier today for much of southern and central Alberta. In fact, some regions could receive up to 150 millimeters of rain by late Wednesday. In Lethbridge tonight, we should see up to about 10 millimeters with gusty winds and a low near 7 degrees. Tuesday, periods of rain again with a high near 12 degrees. Wednesday, more showers developing with a high of 19. The rain clouds should clear out by Thursday, giving us lots of sunshine and a high of 25. Slightly cooler on Friday with a high of 22. Saturday, there's a slight chance of showers developing with a high near 25. Sunday, a mixture of sun and cloud with the mercury dropping to 21. Now checking the almanac, the average high for this time of year is 22 degrees with an average low of 9. The record high was set back in 1987 at 32 degrees, and the record low was +1 in 1969. The sun rose at 5:23 and set at 9:40. Looking at Tuesday's national forecast now, it should be mainly cloudy at 17 in both Victoria and Vancouver. There's also a slight chance of showers developing on the lower mainland. Expect rain and 15 degrees in Edmonton. A rainfall warning was issued for Calgary on Monday, much of the same on Tuesday with a high of only 11 degrees. Mainly cloudy and 20 in Regina. Overcast and 18 for Saskatoon. A chance of thunder showers developing at 21 in Winnipeg on Tuesday. Light showers and 26 in Toronto. A mixture of sun and cloud and 26 degrees as well in Ottawa. Partly cloudy and 27 for Montreal. In Atlantic Canada, expect rain and 19 degrees in Fredericton. Periods of rain and 16 degrees in Halifax. Rain and 15 in Charlottetown, PEI. And in St. John's, Newfoundland, it should be mainly cloudy with a high of only 8 degrees on Tuesday. The household debt-to-income ratio of Canadians is at 182.5% in the first quarter as incomes grew faster than debt. Stats Canada says the ratio dropped from a record high of 185% in the previous quarter as income grew by 3.3%. Household credit market debt, meanwhile, was up 2%. That means there was around $1.83 in debt for every dollar of household disposable income in the first quarter. The household debt service ratio also dropped from 13.72 to 13.48% in the last 3 months of 2021. Cenovus Energy says it has reached a deal to acquire the remaining working interest in the Sunrise Oil Sands project in northern Alberta. Cenovus already had a 50% stake in Sunrise and is the operator of the project. It is purchasing the remaining 50% from BP for $600 million in cash. It is also moving forward with a variable payment with a maximum cumulative value of another $600 million expiring after 2 years. Cenovus will also give BP its 35% stake in the undeveloped Bay du Nord project in offshore Newfoundland and Labrador. An independent research group says China has overtaken Germany as the biggest buyer of Russian energy exports since the start of the war in Ukraine. The shift reflects how the Asian nation relies on Russia's energy exports. India is also boosting Russia's export revenues as Western nations have been trying to limit Moscow's cash flow by cutting their energy imports. Industry experts say India has guzzled nearly 60 million barrels of Russian oil in 2022 so far. That is up from 12 million in all of 2021. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was down 532 points on the day to finish at 19,742. The Dow was down 876 points to 30,516. The S&P 500 was down 151 points to 3749, and the Nasdaq was down 530 on the day to 10,809. West Texas Intermediate Oil was up 26 cents to $120.93 US per barrel. Natural gas was down 24 cents to $8.61 US. Gold was down 4 cents to $18.1922 US an ounce, and silver was up a cent to $21.09 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $14.97 per bushel, barley's at $10.01, canola is at $24.70, and corn is at $12.01 per bushel. Live cattle were down $2.20 to $134. Feeder cattle August contract was down $3.15 to $171.33, and lean hogs were up 20 cents to $108. The Canadian dollar was up slightly over the past 24 hours to 77.54 US. Recapping one of our top stories, a rainfall warning remains in effect for the Alberta Foothills. Environment Canada says we should expect between 75 and 125 millimeters of rain in many parts of southern and central Alberta by Wednesday morning. Some areas, including the city of Calgary, could see up to 150 millimeters. There are warnings that heavy downpours could cause flash flooding and water pooling on roads. A historian from Yale University says Russian President Vladimir Putin is prepared to starve much of the developing world in order to win his war with Russia. Our foreign affairs expert Lisa Daftari will have more details for us shortly.
Here's today's Bridge City News Community Calendar. Discover how Lethbridge has played an important military role in the preservation of world peace and security by visiting the Lethbridge Military Museum at the Vimy Ridge Armory at the Lethbridge Airport. The museum is open to the public each Wednesday from noon to 4 p.m. Special arrangements for other days and times can be made by calling 403-892-6531. Admission is free, but donations are gratefully accepted. For more information, visit lethbridgemilitarymuseum.org. Celebrate Recovery is a Christ-centered recovery program for any hurt, hang-up, and habit. This group meets Friday nights at Park Meadows Baptist Church. The evening begins at 7 p.m. with a large group session, followed by small groups at 8 with coffee and dessert at 9. For more information, visit celebraterecovery.ca or call the Park Meadows Church office at 403-327-4422. And that's your Bridge City News Community Calendar.
A Yale historian says Russian President Vladimir Putin says he's prepared to starve much of the developing world in order to win Russia's war in Ukraine. Historian Timothy Snyder says he believes Putin will use food security to his advantage and called it the latest chapter of hunger politics. To discuss this in more detail is our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Naftari, who joins us from Los Angeles. Lisa, many agree with this Yale historian Timothy Snyder that Putin will do whatever it takes to win the war with Ukraine.
Right. And, it's not always that we agree with the Yale professors on their rhetoric, but this seems like it's going in the right direction. What he is suggesting has already started. It's nothing new. And it makes perfect sense, right? When you think about Putin, you think about what he has attempted to do in Ukraine and has not been able to, get that big finale or get, the kind of attention he wanted on the world stage. Well, this is a way he can do it. When he does affect the world's food supply, which he has already, had a domino effect in affecting, then, he is making those reverberations that he wanted. He is getting the headlines that he wanted. We here in the United States say, why is President Biden blaming everything on Putin? And of course, that's true. Not everything could be blamed on Putin, but certainly, many of the fears that are going on, in the Western world and throughout the world, again, it starts here in the West and it goes eastward, do begin with the war in Ukraine, and when will it end? I mean, all of this money that the United States and other countries have pledged to help the Ukrainians could be used to, again, fortify the economy, help with fortifying our borders, help with our national security, help with the baby formula shortage, and the list goes on. And we're short on so many things that we need help with here, but yet we're waiting to see what Putin's next move is. And again, these very, very harsh consequences, including the world's food supply.
Now, speaking of food, 3 months after McDonald's suspended operations in Russia, people have been flocking to the restaurants again, which reopened under a new name under a Russian owner. Lisa, McDonald's sold its 850 restaurants to one guy, Alexander Govor.
Yes, and I think this guy got so lucky in one part of his life, and then he never thought this would happen, where he would lose the ability to operate as McDonald's. So what did he do? He made his lemonade by opening up his stores again in a different name, and in Russian it kind of translates into tasty period. Look, I think the Russian people are fed up, and they know that obviously what their leader is doing in Ukraine will have its consequences back at home, including losing most, if not all, of their American franchises. Now, I always thought it was interesting because if you look at places like Iran that are sanctioned by the United States, they have something similar to a Starbucks, but it's called something similar, and I don't remember the name exactly, but it was kind of like a knockoff of Starbucks because they can't have Starbucks. And here you have, restaurants opening up like McDonald's, but can't exactly be McDonald's. And, it's kind of like tongue in cheek, but obviously the story is indicative of something much more macro, and that being the consequences of the sanctions on the Russian people. It's not just the oligarchs. It does go down to the main street economy like it does in any environment or any country where there are sanctions. And, that's what we're hoping, is that the people, the oligarchs and everyone else, put the pressure on Putin to back down, take that off ramp, and get out of Ukraine and end this crisis once and for all.
Lisa, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau was in the U.S. recently for the Summit of the Americas, and next month your leader, U.S. President Joe Biden, is traveling to both Saudi Arabia and Israel. What's the purpose of the visits?
Yeah, well, I don't know if he knows the purpose of the visits. There was actually a clip where he doesn't really know where he's going, but he's going to go there. These trips have mostly in the past been symbolic more than anything else because they can always pick up the phone and dial. But obviously going there, it's showing sort of a solidarity. Biden sitting down with Saudi Arabia and Israel is important because what we always say is that the Biden presidency is the 2.0 of the Obama presidency. And if you remember, President Obama did it was very obvious about distancing himself from both Israel and Saudi Arabia in the effort to get very close to the Iranian regime and get that nuclear deal through. Now we have a stalemate with the nuclear deal. It's not going forward. So President Biden is hoping to at least normalize relations with Saudi Arabia and therefore get perhaps Saudi Arabia to normalize relations formally with Israel, closing out the Abraham Accords to bring its biggest player in the Arab world on board to be cooperative with Israel. That will build a huge opportunity and economy, and really change the course of the Middle East in a way that we did not think was possible. Of course, we're seeing the Abraham Accords play out with the smaller Arab states like the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain, and it's doing phenomenal things to the Middle East and the people of the Middle East and the economy. So this is a very important trip, and we'll see what happens with the Iran nuclear deal because day by day we're hearing from the European leaders, we're hearing from the U.S. officials who are involved that it's not looking good. The Iran regime is flexing its muscles more than ever, threatening to, have more enriched uranium and keep going forward with their nuclear program, while shutting out inspectors, taking down cameras. They're not playing along. So we'll see how this plays out.
The Canadian government committed $27 million on helping to ease migration pressures at the recent Summit of the Americas. Lisa, so many, as you and I have talked about in the past, are leaving countries in Central and South America. Now, speaking of migrants, the federal court in the U.S. ruled against the Biden administration on illegal immigration yet again.
Yes. So if you're following the reports, last week we had on the Foreign Desk a breaking story about how the Biden administration has doubled down not only on letting these migrants into the United States, but why just let them come in through the borders and stay at the borders? They're going to push them deeper into some of these big American cities, starting with lucky us, Los Angeles. And obviously this was, it's a crazy story when you think about it, not only letting them in, but giving them plane tickets and allowing them to go to cities of their choice and giving them hotel rooms. And there are exposés on all of this. It can be, researched. But now Louisiana and Texas went after the Biden administration, said, wait a minute, this is not legal what you're claiming to do. And in fact, it was ruled in their favor that it's in fact illegal to allow these migrants to come not only into the United States, but to push them into certain cities. So there's a lot of backlash on this. It makes no logical sense whatsoever, but now it makes no legal sense as well. So they have this on their side. But you know what? They keep coming, as you said, and you're set up to the question to say there are thousands on the way. We're seeing the biggest migrant caravan ever on its way, inching closer to the southern border of the United States. So where are they going to go? And it's the message coming from the White House. When it's open borders, they're going to come, and we're going to have to know and deal with the aftermath.
Lisa, two countries grappling with crippling U.S. sanctions just signed a 20-year cooperation plan in Tehran over the weekend. The governments in Iran and Venezuela believe this new accord will help both countries in the long run, not just when it comes to oil, but also agriculture, defense, and tourism.
Yeah, this is it's mind-boggling because, again, we have U.S. officials, European officials at the table trying to beg the Iranian regime to come and normalize relations, come sit down with us, come join the rest of the world, open up your economy, let us take the sanctions off. And instead, they're off making deals with China, making deals with Venezuela, doubling down their support for Putin, doubling down their support for North Korea. They don't want to play with the good guys. They want to play with the bad guys, and it's obvious. Now, what does this deal mean? Look, this is a symbolic deal because we know that the relationship between Caracas and Tehran has been going on for a very long time. We know that there are Hezbollah operatives in Latin America. We know that there are, informants in Latin America, in many, many countries. And the message for us is that they're at the footstep of the United States. They have access. If we think Tehran is thousands of miles away, well, they're at our border as well. And this should be very, very scary. But for some reason, we're not paying attention to it whatsoever. This deal is just formalizing what has already been going on. Now, neither of these countries have the economy to really keep this deal or keep it in place. That's the same thing we said with China for 25 years. They made a 25-year deal with China. We'll see what happens. But again, this is more symbolic than anything else, but it should wake us up to this relationship and what it means for us here in the United States and in Canada.
Lisa, China's defense minister has accused the United States of trying to hijack the support of countries in the Asia-Pacific region to turn them against Beijing. Tell me more.
Well, the United States is trying to insert its influence too little too late, I should say, but they're trying their best to give incentives to companies to come back to the United States, trying to get them to obviously conduct their business here instead of going overseas. It's very difficult to make that sell, especially right now with the inflation that we're experiencing. Also in geopolitics, you look at what's going on surrounding China and its obviously its endeavors to grow its influence in that region, but the United States trying to intervene, trying to get closer to Taiwan, make weapons deals with them, try to get closer to Japan, again, giving its support to South Korea, and not allowing China to grow or expand its influence in the seas or in the countries that are nearby. Again, maybe a little too little too late, but at least the White House has woken up to the fact that this is a growing threat and China will not back down from its ambitions, certainly in the region and more globally as well.
Now, speaking of China, U.S. Army Pacific Commanding General Charles Flynn has raised concerns about the buildup of Chinese defense infrastructure along the India-China border during a recent visit to India.
Yes, where are they not building up their presence is the question. But every time there's a story like this, we cover it the foreign desk. Again, the wake-up call is to say they are building their influence everywhere. If they're looking at India, they're looking at the African continent, they're looking at the Middle East. They've struck a deal with Iran. They obviously are eyeing Taiwan and waiting for that golden moment to strike. It's very apparent that their agenda is to grow and expand their influence. So when we do have a general that says, wait a minute, this is new, we should look at that buildup and ask ourselves, what do they want out of India? And perhaps more trade, perhaps more influence, perhaps they can make an exchange. And what they do is they go into countries that want the technology and they say, tit for tat, we'll give you technology, we'll give you the infrastructures in exchange for influence, in exchange for presence, in exchange for us to be here. And that's exactly what we don't want. We don't want them to grow their influence and their presence globally. And unfortunately, they're beating us to it. They're getting there first. That's the issue.
Now, we talked a bit about the India-China border. Let's talk a bit more about your border here. And more than $330,000 worth of fentanyl was seized at the U.S.-Mexico border as overdose deaths, Lisa, surge in suburban areas.
Yeah, this is probably the most important story of our time right now. We're looking at young, high schoolers, middle schoolers wanting to experiment for the very first time and dying of overdose. We did this report at the Foreign Desk, kind of putting these two stories together. More than 10 young children I think they were under the age of 18, high schoolers experimenting in a suburb of Illinois in 1 week. And when you look at that, I'm sorry, in 24 hours, and in the same week, you had $330,000 worth of fentanyl found at the border. This is one drop in the bucket. There is so much fentanyl coming over the border, and the reason why we put these two together is just the juxtaposition of the two stories, is to say, this is happening, 10 students dying in 1 day, 24 hours, and then in the same week, finding all of this fentanyl that continues to come. So how do we stem this flow of this drug that's coming in very, very seemingly innocent ways? Again, it's laced Percocet and laced pills that, again, children who are wanting to just experiment with, and it's hitting our suburbs, and it's really the main killer of young people. And again, we don't have the budget to fight this. President Trump was the first to say, wait a minute, we have an issue here, but then nothing was really done about it, and we need assets to go after fentanyl. Again, it's becoming the number one national security crisis in our country here, and I'm sure that its reverberations are very consequential in Canada as well, with young people experimenting and dying of overdose. And yes, again, let's keep our eyes on this story, Hal. This is a very important and very crucial thing to focus on right now.
Our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari, thanks so much for joining us once again from Los Angeles.
My pleasure.
UCP caucus chair Nathan Neudorf announced recently that he will not be seeking the leadership of the UCP. 4 other candidates have already put their names forward, including former Finance Minister Travis Taves, former Wild Rose Party leaders Brian Jean and Daniel Smith, and independent MLA Todd Loewen. Nathan Neudorf joins us now via Zoom. Nathan, welcome back to Bridge City News.
Morning, Hal. Great to see you.
So why not seek the party leadership? I mean, you sit on so many committees, hundreds of other committees. You're the party's caucus chair. Why not take the next step?
Well, I like to do things well, Hal, and I have only been in this job for 3 years. And though I have a pretty extensive resume to date, there's a few more things I'd like to accomplish and work on and learn. And I think that needs to be considered. It's not just about the leadership. It's also about leading the entire party in 87 constituencies into a general election, a little less than a year from now. So there's a little bit of that networking, a little bit of that organizational development that I haven't quite accomplished yet. I'll keep working on it, but my time's not quite yet.
Have you officially thrown your support behind another candidate?
Well, at this time as caucus chair, I think that would probably not be helpful. I support lots of those individuals moving forward. I'd like to see that, but my focus as caucus chair, my focus now that I've decided not to put my name forward for leadership is to work on unity. So no matter who the grassroots pick, I can work with them, work to continue to work on unity for our party, our Conservative movement, make sure the team is working together, and maybe prematurely picking a side or picking a favorite might not be seen as the best path forward as caucus chair.
Let's chat a bit about that unity here for just a moment. We've seen a lot of infighting within the party. What will it take to really unite the United Conservative Party once again as we head in towards next year's provincial election?
Well, I think it's going to take a number of things, Hal. I think it's going to start with listening, truly listening to the people of Alberta, particularly the Conservative movement. I think it's going to take time to consider those different perspectives with a sincere respect for different ideas and different pathways forward. It's going to take hard work, and I think it's going to take clear vision. I think whoever wants to become the leader of not just the United Conservative Party, but the Premier of Alberta will need to present that clear vision on how we continue to recover from the pandemic, how we move forward with economic initiatives, and how we respond to Ottawa and some of the work that they've done, which, to be quite frank, is often opposed to the direction Alberta wants to see them go, see ourselves go.
Let's chat a bit about Jason Kenney's leadership review. Just over 51%, that's not enough of a mandate to really stay on, so he decided to step down. He's staying on as interim leader for now until you choose a new leader. Were you surprised that it came in so low, just over 51 points?
Well, unfortunately, I wasn't overly surprised. I have spent a lot of time in my constituency, a lot of time talking to people right around the province, and there was a great level of discontent. I mean, picking an actual number, that was very, very difficult to do. But I'm pleased with the leadership that he's shown, that he recognized that it wasn't enough of a mandate to carry on, even though he had won the required 50+1. And I think the Path Forward caucus had a great debate about whether he should stay as interim, and to provide stability and not multiple cabinet choices between now and a new leader being chosen was, I think, one of the factors that allowed him to stay and provide that stability. So we still have work to do, but I think we are becoming more united all the time. And that's difficult to do with the diversity of views that we share under the big tent of the Conservative movement.
Nathan, with Premier Kenney stepping down, will the party still pursue its own provincial police force and pension system? And what about taking the Trudeau Liberals to court over invoking the Emergencies Act?
Well, I think that will remain to be seen. I think a new leader will have some things to say about that. I expect it to be well debated during the leadership race. But many of those recommendations were put forward by the Fair Deal panel, and those are recommendations brought to us by Albertans. And they do overall want a fair deal. So it might be an adjustment in how we approach that. But there are some huge fiscal benefits for us to repatriate that pension plan. And if we're going to have our own police force, which would add many benefits to our rural areas in particular, and we want to see the RCMP continue more on a level similar to where the FBI and CIA would operate in the United States, that higher level of national security, I think the RCMP does very, very well. And this isn't about the members, this is about organizational responsibilities and that kind of thing. So I think those initiatives will need to continue to be pursued. How aggressively, what the timeline is, the direction taken, a lot of that will be influenced by the new leader, and whether or not we continue with that action with the courts. I think, again, Albertans expect us to fight for a fair deal for Alberta, and we need to make sure that we continue to push that our jurisdiction, particularly covering our natural resources, is protected, so that we can actually meet the needs not only of Alberta and Canada, but of the world, as we see with the energy crisis that we have right now, brought on by the war instigated by Russia in Ukraine.
Last time we chatted, you mentioned how a few family physicians would be headed to Lethbridge. It's a good thing because more doctors are leaving here. Where are we at when it comes to addressing the severe doctor shortage here in southwestern Alberta?
Well, we've got good news. We've definitely turned a corner. There are 11 doctors hired. They're in the process of finding sites. They're in the process of moving to Lethbridge. They're in the process of setting up a facility. And AHS anticipates that many, if not all of those 11 should be practicing right here in Lethbridge by the end of the year. And they have a further 13 to 18 doctors somewhere in that process of continuing to vet them and interview them and work through their credentials and hopefully bring on more of them. They've been hitting a pace of roughly 2 hires per month, and we hope to see that continue. And that's very, very good news that we're changing that directional trend. So doctors aren't leaving now, doctors are net coming to Lethbridge, and we hope we can pursue that further.
Now, sticking with healthcare here for just a moment, a number of Albertans have spoken out against the UCP canceling the insulin pump therapy program, which has impacted a lot of diabetics. They're not happy about it. Any chance that program could be brought back?
Well, that change has been paused. Minister Copping made that very, very clear to work through them. And the whole transition of that program was to allow for a more sustainable cost recovery and a cost payment of that program through private insurance, through other insurance methods that are offered to those clients. The great majority of the roughly 4,000 people on that program, I think it's over 90% were covered with that transition, but we want to make sure that everyone is covered, that less than 10% that didn't have that coverage, they didn't have that access to that. That's what the pause is brought in for. We want to leave no person behind. We want to make sure they're all covered, that they have access to the newest and best technology, and that they have access to the services that we need. So I think we're going to see that work through and have the best services, the best supports for those people struggling with type 1 diabetes in the very near future, as Minister Copping works to complete that program and make sure that everyone has the services that they need.
Now, the province offered more help for those struggling with drug addictions, Nathan. The Overdose Prevention app is now available across Alberta, and the Associate Minister of Mental Health and Addictions, Mike Ellis, says the Digital Overdose Response System, or DORS, has helped a lot of people in Calgary and Edmonton here in the South Zone. How does it actually work?
That's a great question. It's something where they can very quickly, right when they need it, as we all I hopefully know that when someone struggling with addiction decides to make a change, that's a very short window before they fall into old patterns or get dragged into situations that they continues their addiction. So this helps them almost instantly go through their phone and get the help they need reach out to those that are going to care. They can find their location, they can get them in a program, and they can help get them the treatment that they need right when they need it. In some cases, even an hour or two later is too late to capture that desire to get that treatment. This helps that become much more instantaneous, and often within a few minutes, they're receiving the help that they need.
A number of Albertans, Nathan, are wondering when those utility rebate checks will be forthcoming. Now, the government mentioned that we'll be seeing a break on both our natural gas and electricity rebates. Back in February and March, the NDP's been slamming the UCP on this, saying, where's the money? Show me the money. So let me ask you, is the check in the mail?
Well, not quite, Hal. It's a different system than that. The process is at work. The electricity rebates will be applied directly to each individual's bill. So they won't see a check in the mail, but they should see that rebate of $50 a month over 3 months on their bill. And that should be starting as soon as July. It might take a little bit of time. There's a lot of electricity users across the province, but that's the start date for that. And the natural gas rebates are slated to begin in October. So again, when we start going into those colder months, we start using heat a little bit more, that's when they'll see the benefit of that adjustment in October and the following months as we get into winter, depending where the prices are at.
Yeah, we could definitely use the break right now, especially with inflation at over 6%. It's just hurting so many families here across the province and across the country for that matter. The COVID-19 pandemic also hurt a lot of Albertans, not just physically, but also financially and mentally as well. What mental health supports are available, especially for many of our seniors who were isolated for so long?
Absolutely, Hal. Yeah, we've worked a lot on that. And in this past week, we've announced several new announcements for treatment and recovery and mental health supports for youth in particular and for seniors. Just in the last day or two, we announced more than $6.3 million has been committed to 4 organizations to deliver mental health and addiction initiatives targeted for older Albertans. Some of that will be centered in Calgary, like the United Way in Calgary and area, the Society of Calgary, but other institutions like the Imagine Institute for Learning and the Alberta Elder Abuse Awareness Council also receive funds, and they operate much more provincially to help with seniors who are struggling with some of those things for being really kept indoors that can really affect their mental health. So there's supports there to really help them.
Now, the spring setting of the legislature wrapped up recently. Now, you had an opportunity to chat with Jobs, Economy and Innovation Minister Doug Schweitzer about our province's growth in the tech sector and economic diversification. Tell me a bit about how Alberta is trying to rebound financially right now.
Yeah, it's probably one of the most exciting areas as we recover from the pandemic. We can talk about the tech sector, specifically the rate of growth of venture capital investment into our tech sector has been on just an incredible growth rate. Just to give you a few numbers, Hal, back in 2017, prior to our government, there was a $37 million venture capital investment in the province. In 2018, that went to 118 million. In 2019, after we won the election, it went to 227 million. 2020, 455 million. Last year, 561 millions in tech sector. And this year, first quarter alone, we're already at $466 million. That growth rate is off the charts, Hal, and we're really excited about that. We're seeing huge new investments in TV and movies and those kind of things, video gaming, headquarters coming to Calgary. There's just so much excitement there that is really diversifying our economy. We're getting into the financial sector as well, on top of other exciting investments like hydrogen and different things in our energy sector. So we've got a lot of that diversity happening, right here in Lethbridge with new industries and new companies coming to town, as well as we're building on our agricultural and our food production industries already well established. So a lot to look forward to, a lot of private money and really exciting times.
So let's talk about any potential cash infusions and investments here in southwestern Alberta, specifically Lethbridge.
Well, we're still talking. Obviously, some of that is being redeveloped right now as we go through a leadership race. But I know I'm talking a lot about our healthcare needs, whether that's EMS, whether that's a cath lab, whether that's solutions for patient transfer. We know a lot of ambulances get caught up going back and forth to Calgary. We've talked about family doctors. We should add in their nurse practitioners and the great work that they do helping fill that gap. There's still more work to do there. And I do bring up the need for a third bridge. So there's some big target investments there. There's still some needs that we're working on. And it's not just about money, but it's also about building Lethbridge as a hub for services, healthcare in particular, but tourism as well, and a number of other initiatives where we can really lead the province in our trade, in our travel. We saw the investment in the airport and exhibition park. So we're really building on the success of Lethbridge as the Deep South hub.
Now, before I let you go, I wanted to ask you about this visitor's pass through the popular Kananaskis country in the mountain parks west of Calgary. If people don't have that daily or season pass, they're facing a $150 fine, and that's a big hit for a lot of families. Now, your government brought in the policy to help pay for the cost of maintaining the area. Any chance that policy could be scrapped, as the NDP said they would, should they win the next election?
Well, I find that curious position for the NDP to take. They celebrate the environment, we celebrate the environment, and they know that it takes money to pay for that. The Kananaskis sees several million visitors every year, and that kind of influence on our nature and our natural places. We need to pick up garbage, we need to clean bathrooms, we need to clean sites, we need to make sure trails are clear, and we're protecting our environment. So I'm curious as how the NDP would pay for that. Would they bring back a carbon tax and raise it like we've seen the federal Liberals and the federal NDP do? Or would they bring back the gasoline tax when people are least able to afford it? I think $10 a day for a user pay to help maintain those areas is the best approach on a user pay system. And I think everybody wants to see our environment and natural places kept pristine and clear and cleaned up. So that does take a cost, and it's minimal at that. And I think we saw great success last year with over $10 million reinvested in those parks and natural spaces that we all love to celebrate.
Lethbridge East MLA and UCP Caucus Chair Nathan Neudorf, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you, Hal. Appreciate it as always.
On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless and thanks for watching.